Hello, everyone. We are Russian Women in Arbitration, and welcome to our first online event, an interview with Sophie Nappert, one of the leading arbitrators in the world. And before we start with an interview, I will just briefly introduce our association as well as ourselves, who will moderate the discussion today. My name is Tuyana, and I'm an associate at International Arbitration Practice in Bryan, Leighton, Paisner in Moscow. And today I'm here with my colleagues, Elena Burova, a senior associate at Ivanyan and Partners, and Veronika Burachevskaya, an associate at EPAM offices. So earlier this year, the three of us established the Russian Women in Arbitration Association, a first professional community and a networking platform dedicated to female arbitration practitioners in Russia. And I would like to mention that we received a tremendous support from the members of our arbitration community, and we would like to thank everyone who encouraged us in our pursuit and made this possible. And as some of you know, we were planning to have a big inaugural event here in Moscow, but we were lucky enough to schedule it right in the middle of March. So when this COVID-19 pandemic escalated, so unfortunately we had to postpone it then. But on the bright side, we're encouraged to switch to this online format, and we can speak to all of you right now. So we really hope that the situation will resolve itself in the nearest future, and we will be able to welcome you offline at our events. So now I will pass to Veronika, and she will tell you more about what we do and what we plan to do and which goals we pursue. Veronika?
Yeah, thank you, Tuyana. Well, when we established the Russian Women in Arbitration earlier this year, we thought of all those wonderful and inspiring women and their impact on the diversity, on gender diversity worldwide. And so we created this organization as a professional community for female professionals, for female practitioners in international arbitration. And I would say that the main goal of the organization is to promote gender diversity and and women leadership in Russia. And our activities, well, we haven't done a lot yet, but I do really hope that after quarantine ends, we will be able to do all the activities that we are planning to do, which are organizing seminars and events involving female practitioners, discussing challenges that female professionals face in Russia and abroad, raising public awareness and making studies, spreading knowledge about gender diversity among students and young professionals, and conducting studies and research. And here I should mention that actually right now we're conducting a study on gender diversity issues in Russia. And this study, inter alia, will reflect statistics on the appointments of female arbitrators in Russia, because we were able to obtain certain statistical data from some Russian major arbitral institutions. So we're very excited about that, and we will definitely post and let you all know about the results as soon as it's done. But above all this, and this is my personal belief as well, it is very important to share examples of successful women and their achievements in international arbitration, because there are a lot of such examples, and these examples could really inspire young women who only start their career in international arbitration, who only make their first steps in this area. And I'm so excited and I'm so happy that we start today with one of the brightest examples of such successful and such leading woman in international arbitration, Sophie Nappert, whom my colleague Elena Burova will introduce to the audience.
Yeah, thank you very much, Veronika, and thank you everyone who has joined us recently. We are really delighted to have you here and welcome everyone. Thank you very much, Sophie, for agreeing to participate in this session, and thank you for taking time and being so enthusiastic, because the reason why we invited Sophie Nappert for this interview session is because initially we invited Sophie for our offline event, which we planned during the Russian Arbitration Week in March, and Sophie was always very supportive and responsive and enthusiastic about our association and joining our events. So when we thought about going online and about conducting a digital event, probably the first speaker that we had in mind whom we could potentially invite was Sophie Nappert. And let me tell you a few words about Sophie, for those of you who don't know, but I'm sure that most of our audience already know Sophie in some capacity. So Sophie Nappert is one of top female arbitrators worldwide, and she's an arbitrator in independent practice. She's based in London. Before becoming a full-time arbitrator, Sophie was a counsel, and Sophie is dual qualified in Canada and in England. And she was the head of international arbitration practice of one of the major international law firms. Apart from these capacities, Sophie also lectures regularly on various topical issues of international arbitration and dispute resolution. And by the way, recently Sophie was awarded with the GAR Prize for one of her lectures on investment arbitration, which is, by the way, available online for those of you who are interested. And this was a lecture which was titled Escaping from Freedom, the Dilemma of an Improved ICDS Mechanism. But beyond all that, I should perhaps say that another angle of Sophie's professional interest is the impact of technology on arbitration and more broadly on dispute resolution. And we will speak in detail about that a bit later. So I will not reveal now all my cards about that. And the purpose of our session is to get to know Sophie better. So you will learn more about that. So perhaps I should also mention as a housekeeping matter that this video session will be recorded and hopefully it will be available online later. So without further ado, I would like to pass the floor to my fellow co-moderator, Tuyana Molokhoeva.
Thank you. Thank you, Elena, for a great introduction. So, Sophie, let me start with this one. I was surprised that among other free languages that you speak, you also speak Russian. So could you please tell us where did you get a chance to study it and what encouraged you to do that?
Thank you very much. First of all, congratulations on your inaugural event. I think it's a fantastic initiative, and I wish I had grown up with this in this field when I was starting out. It is wonderful to see the voice of women featured in this manner, and also the opportunity to network, the opportunity to make friends, and to share experiences. So congratulations on that. Well, first of all, I always thought, was always fascinated growing up in Canada, obviously, with Russia, the language, the culture, the hockey players, and I had a friend who wanted to study the language. I was working as a lawyer at the time, and there were some evening courses at McGill University where I studied law. And he said, I would really like to study, but I don't want to go alone. And I said, okay, well, I'll go with you. And he dropped out, but I stayed for 2.5 years. And so I had the opportunity of learning the language, a little bit of the literature. And I can understand and read it. My spoken Russian, I need serious practice with now, because this is obviously a few years back. But I do have a good amount of cases with Russian parties. And so I do get the opportunity of reading and hearing it. And it's always a pleasure.
Oh, yeah, that's really great that you can I mean, you obviously didn't have in mind that you will have some certain cases related to Russia at the time, and now you can actually practice it, and you can actually use this opportunity.
I mean, if there is a lesson there for anybody, and including myself, is that if you pursue something that really interests you, it will come out useful at one point in your life. Nothing in terms of learning, nothing is wasted in my view. Certainly not languages. So there you are.
Yeah, most definitely. That's really a curious thing about life. But have you? I guess you've been to Russia, right?
I have, yes. And the last time I was there was in 2016 already. My God. It was at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. I was there to speak on a panel about the Yukos Award that had been rendered recently. So that was my last time, and I was going to be there in March, but next time, soon, hopefully.
Yeah, we really hope that it will happen soon.
Yeah.
So you have a degree in both in common law and civil law jurisdictions, one from the McGill University in Montreal and another from King's College London. Could you please tell us why did you decide to study in England after McGill and not, for example, the US, which is, I think, a closer choice to Canada?
Oh, yes, it is. It is closer geographically. It's not closer by culture. After graduating from McGill, so I did my 2 civil and common law degrees at McGill. I did a master's degree at King's afterwards. But I did work in Montreal for 4 years, 3.5 years as a young lawyer. I qualified there. And I thought it was fine, interesting. But I really felt that if you wanted to practice in a more international environment, North America was not going to be the place in those days. And so I started looking for cities where you could have a more international experience, legally speaking, like more international disputes. I was a litigator at the time. And London was one of these places. It sounded to me quite obvious that it had to be Europe somewhere. And London at the time was very welcoming, as I think it still is, to young lawyers from other jurisdictions. Even if you weren't qualified, you could sort of show up, get a job, practice for a few years, and then decide to requalify. So it was a very open to foreign talent, and I really liked that mindset. And so I didn't go with the purpose of working. I went for the purpose of doing the master's degree. And then I said to myself, if it doesn't work, I'm going to come back home because I have my job. But after my master's degree, I was hired by Norton Rose at the time, who had done their first ICC arbitration. And so that's what happened. I never came back.
Oh, that's really, really great. And I think London is indeed still one of the places where you go if you want to do international arbitration. So you passed the exam after you have a solicitor status, right, in England?
Qualification, yes. I requalified maybe, I would say maybe 3.5 years after arriving. Because if you practice for a while in a certain field, you can get equivalences, so you don't have to pass all of the exams. You can have some equivalences in your field of work recognized. So that was the idea.
Yeah. So before you became an arbitrator, you obviously have had this very substantial experience as a counsel as well. So why did you decide to focus on an arbitrator's role?
So this was 13 years ago that I did that, and I left. I was maybe in my late 30s, early 40s at the time, and I was looking for a new challenge. I was getting a bit tired of conflicts of interest because I was starting to get appointed a little bit, And I had to say no all the time because obviously my firm, which was Denton's, was big. You know, it's a big firm, and it was difficult to. And I said to myself, I wonder what it would be like if I could stop saying no and say yes and get those appointments and do something a little bit different with my skill set. And but I was relatively young, you know, and I was a woman. So I asked one of my clients, whom I trusted, and I said, look, I'm thinking of doing this, but if you're not going to appoint me, it's pointless. I'm not going to do it. And the person said something that I've always remembered. He said, look, obviously we need, you know, senior people on tribunals in certain cases. We need the authority, we need the names, but we also need someone who actually reads the papers and does the work. And maybe there is a niche there for you. And so I thought that was interesting. I had not thought about it that way. And so that's what prompted me to, and I received one nomination, my first nomination from a former opponent, and then I decided, okay, I'm going to do this. Let's see what happens, and that's how it happened.
And you like it? Do you like it to be an arbitrator more than a counsel, or maybe there is something in the role of a counsel that you still miss sometimes?
Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a completely different planet. Being an arbitrator, it's not for everybody. It's quite isolating, actually, as compared to counsel, where you have a lot of teamwork. Being an arbitrator, you have to be prepared to be with yourself a lot. I like the idea of helping. I find it more constructive in terms of work because you help people sort something out, as opposed to, you know, the work of counsel more about persuading and putting forward one side of the story. So that's what I like about it. But I find it I miss a lot the adrenaline of counsel work, and I miss the group work as well. But it's a choice I've made, and I'm lucky to have very interesting cases, perhaps more varied than what I had as counsel, where obviously in the big firms you are in a certain department with a certain industry, and that's where you tend to stay. So now I get all types of cases.
Yeah, that's right. I was really impressed by the extremities. I mean, you sit as an arbitrator in like various cases, starting from, I don't know, simple commercial ones to price renegotiation and investment arbitration as well. So that definitely is very impressive. And you mentioned earlier that it is quite a competitive profession being an arbitrator, and especially as a woman, I think. And in your opinion, what makes a successful arbitrator? If you were asked to name, say, 3 top qualities which you definitely need to possess to be a top arbitrator?
So this is the type of question. You ask 10 people, you get 10 answers, right? But
right.
My answer, for what it's worth, the first thing I would say is you need to listen. You really, there's a lot of egos in this industry, as I'm sure you know. But being an arbitrator is not about yourself and your ego. It's about the parties before you and their dispute. And so I find that the best arbitrators are good listeners. They really give the parties the impression that they are being taken seriously and they are being heard. That's the first thing I would say. The second thing, it's a more personal thing, a more individual thing, I would say, is you have to be intellectually humble. You have to realize that as good as you think you are as a lawyer, you have certain limitations. Being an arbitrator is a lot about knowing yourself, how your mind works, and the good things and also the problems that you might have, because we all do. And to be aware of that and to be able to work around that in a way that, you know, that makes it fair and helpful to the parties before you. So I would say the second quality is to be humble about your capacity your good sides and the sides where you have certain weaknesses. And the third quality I would say is to be fair. It's easy to say, huh? Difficult sometimes to decide what is fair in certain circumstances. So yeah, hopefully it's a lifelong journey, but I'm working towards that.
Sounds like a lot to go for us, for me.
And well, it is something that I say when I lecture in universities, for example. I get a lot of students who say to me, you know, why do I have to wait until I'm like, I don't know, 38, 40, 45 to be appointed? And I say, well, you don't, except that, you know, do not discount the value of time. There is no application that I know of to substitute for maturity of thought and life experience. I mean, there is a degree of just living that and seeing things and seeing, you know, cases and the way that people behave that just gets better with time. So very young arbitrators, there is a place for that. You have to start somewhere. It's fine, but I would say don't be in too much of a rush. You know, there's no hurry. It's going to happen, and when it does happen, you'll be in complete control of your stuff. You know, that's important, as opposed to feeling like you're completely out of your depth, which is not good.
Yeah, so something should click so that you understand that now you can actually decide.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree with you. So now I will pass to Elena, and she will ask some questions about arbitration.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tuyana. But before I do that, I should perhaps say again 2 housekeeping matters that I should have said before. So first thing is that we have Q&A option here. So all participants are welcome to ask questions to Sophie, which we will either ask during the interview or we will allocate special time afterwards, and we'll choose the most interesting questions that we will present to Sophie. And the second thing that also I would like to mention is that our idea was to build this interview in 3 parts. So first part, which Tuyana has recently covered with Sophie, was dedicated to general issues of background of Sophie and a career of our speaker. Now we will move to arbitration, and we will discuss several issues related to the substance of our field. And then I will also pass the floor to Veronika, who will speak with Sophie about diversity, because as you know, the goal of our association is to promote diversity. First of all, gender diversity, but I think that we will cover some other issues of diversity which are pertinent as well. So let's move to the second part, which we would like to discuss with Sophie. And when I was introducing our speaker, I told that one of the angles of her professional interest relates to impact of technology on arbitration and dispute resolution. And this is not just an interest, because Sophie recently completed Oxford program on blockchain. And also, Sophie has already authored several articles and monographies on the topic of technology and artificial intelligence in arbitration. And I would like to ask you, Sophie, what is this in this field that makes you so interested in it? Could you please tell us more?
Yes. I became well, first of all, I was interested in it. I was interested in artificial intelligence to start with, before blockchain, about 3 or 4 years back now, because it occurred to me that the counsel in front of me, especially with damages experts, were presenting me with evidence that had been obtained as a result of the involvement of algorithms. And I was wondering, what, you know, as a human decision maker who obviously cannot compete with a machine on calculation, do I have to accept what the machine tells me, or do I still have initiative to decide on my own? You know, where do I fit alongside a machine? And that got me interested in the impact of technology on the field. And then I came across blockchain, which, as you know, is a technology of distribution of information peer-to-peer. I didn't know that at the time. I kept reading about blockchain. And the problem in this field is that there is a lot of very poor quality stuff, as well as some high quality stuff. And I didn't know where to look to get information, first of all, that I could understand as a lawyer and that could be relevant to my field. So that's when I enrolled in the Oxford program, thinking to myself, at least I'm going to learn. And I was, if not the only lawyer, I was certainly the only disputes lawyer in my class. And that was fascinating. And that's when I really became fascinated with it, because that field, the only way that I can describe this accurately is it's a parallel world to our real world, where people have the idea of bringing a revolution to society. And the reason for that is it started around about 2008 during the financial crisis. And there were a bunch of computer scientists who decided to organize the system of peer-to-peer transactions, financial transactions, because the trust in banks was gone. The trust in institutions was gone. And so blockchain is a religion. It really is. You have a whole crowd of people there, evangelists, who think that, you know, government is a bad idea, the banks are a bad idea, insurance companies are a bad idea, and so eventually also the courts are a bad idea. Everything institutionalized and central is not to be trusted, and the peers, you and I, people, are to be trusted to interact directly. So the philosophical aspect of it is what really fascinated me. And that's when I realized, you know, there are things to say about this in what we do in the work of dispute resolution. If you are, and also we live in a world where the peers, your peers, the likes that you get on Instagram, all of this is really, really important. And so that's why, that explains to you a little bit why the peer-to-peer aspect of blockchain is something that I found completely riveting. And then after that, after having taken the program, I said to myself, okay, so I can talk about blockchain to lawyers, you know, fine, but really what I should do is talk about blockchain to the creators of these applications, to the creators of the technology people, because they don't know how lawyers think and I don't know how they think. And so there's no dialogue. And so that's how I eventually got in touch with Kleros, which is one of those applications of decentralized dispute resolution. And that's the dialogue that I'm having now with them, which I find is, again, very interesting. And also now that we are living in an environment because of the virus where the courts have been, you know, unable to hold hearings in the normal way, where everything becomes virtual, that sort of dialogue is even more important now. That's a long answer to your question.
No, it's actually very good because it provides lots of things for further thought. And my next question will be also built on one of the ideas that you mentioned. So you mentioned Kleros, the system of dispute resolution that is based on the mechanism which randomly picks up the jurors who are financially incentivized in a way to make the decisions which will be more relevant to the majority, instead of, let's say, making their own decisions based on their private views. And recently you authored an article about that on Global Arbitration Review, which we recommend everyone who are interested in this field to read. And my question relates to, you know, the impact on decision-making of such kind of technology. Do you think that these technologies and this type of decision-making process can fully or partially replace the traditional decision-making process in arbitration? If yes, maybe there are specific categories of disputes where it fits more. So what, in your opinion, could be these categories of disputes, for example?
So Kleros is a classic case of disruption of a field. You know, it's like Uber. You know, you start by a very small niche area, and then people get familiar with the concept, of financially incentivized decisions, things that right now lawyers are thinking this is crazy, this is not possible. But you get familiar with it, and then the first thing you know is that they take a bigger and bigger piece of the market. The thing I will say about Kleros, there are many. They are not alone in that space. They have obviously competitors, but the reason why I'm particularly interested in them is because they are quite serious about. At the moment, they are in a space where they deal mostly with dispute about cryptocurrencies. So it's quite esoteric, and it is a small community. But they have just received a grant from the French government, about 800,000 euros, to take their project to a more mainstream audience. And they're very serious about that. So that's why I think they are very much a project to watch as opposed to some experiment. In answer to your question, will they replace arbitration? I think they are replacing arbitration as we speak in those very small crypto disputes. Their audience and their target field is the e-commerce transactions that take place. Let's say their classic example, as you will have seen in the article, is a lady in Paris who hires a website developer in Guatemala, and he doesn't perform as she wishes, and she doesn't want to pay him $250. You're not going to go to arbitration or even the courts for $250, but you could go to Kleros because it's not going to cost you, very much, and you can still have your dispute resolved. So that's what they're targeting at the moment. The model is not perfect. I am in dialogue with them on several aspects. For example, the place of fairness in their concept, which is not at all obvious when you are paying people to decide in a certain way. But at the end of the day, it is a matter of, does their audience trust them more than the courts to give them justice? That's the real question. And if the audience trusts a bunch of peers, whether they're incentivized financially or not, it's going to work. It is going to work. But at the moment, it's, we're not talking about a threat tomorrow morning, but it is very, very important to keep an eye on what they are doing and others in that space.
Yeah, that's really exciting to monitor how it further develops, and especially what would be the impact of this COVID-19 situation on this aspect. But we'll also touch it later. And now another question that I want to ask you, which is similar to the previous one, and it relates to another issue of impact of technology on dispute resolution, and in particular on artificial intelligence. So on the one hand, we have peer-to-peer based mechanism which can help us in the field of dispute resolution. But on the other hand, we have artificial intelligence, which has completely different mechanisms in its basis, but which in some way can also take its place in the decision-making process. What is your opinion towards that? And again, the question is whether it can replace in the future the typical decision-making process in the arbitration as it is working now?
I would say artificial intelligence is a big threat to arbitration. Not the complex disputes, but the more simple disputes. Again, if you give a client or an arbitration user the option of having a very sophisticated machine come to certain decisions very quickly and cheaply over the work of a lawyer who charges quite a lot of money and gets to a result that is less accurate, then the economics are not in favor of the lawyer. They are in favor of the machine. I think the real challenge is not whether the machines will take over our work, because at the end of the day, those machines are created by humans. It is up to us to draw the line at one point and say, okay, machine, you will help me do this, but at the end of the day, I'm going to take the decision. And that's where it stops. So the partnership with the machine, I think, is the challenge that we have to overcome. And I think it's a challenge where if we do it right, the arbitration process will become better, because you will get the parts that we are not too good at calculation, for example, of accurate numbers. A machine can do that. And the part that we're good at, which is more about psychology or empathy or fairness, then that can be the human. And then, you know, the two together can be quite powerful.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing these ideas. And probably the last question, which would relate to this block of issues that we were going to discuss with you, will relate to the impact of the current COVID-19 crisis on arbitration generally. And as you know, now there are more virtual hearings, and we would like to ask you whether you have had personal experience conducting virtual online hearings these days. How was it? Was it efficient? Was it positive? Which challenges did you face, if any? And what could be potentially improved? And a forward-looking question would be, do you expect that we will see more online hearings after the COVID crisis terminates?
I think it's nice to have choices and options. And I think the idea of having the option of having online hearings, even after, you know, the crisis, is a good one for the field. And if it's going to help in certain disputes where there's not, you know, it doesn't make sense to fly people over all in the same room across several countries, then if it's going to be cheaper and more accessible to have online hearings, I think they should stay. They are a challenge at the moment, I think, for most of us, just because it's new. We need to develop an etiquette and a protocol and a way to that people, you know, all speak in order. And you can't really do that with eye contact very much on the screen. You can do it by raising your hands, but you know, it's a different way of communicating. But I see them as, I mean, I have to say, I'm starting to be really, really in need of seeing people for real now, but it's just because it's been several weeks. But I think just generally, if they are, you know, incorporated in a more normal lifestyle, if they offer an option that's cheaper and more efficient, why not? I think definitely they should stay.
Yeah, I guess that it just depends on the type of the dispute which is in question. So there are some types of disputes which are more appropriate for virtual hearings, but on the other hand, there are heavy and complicated disputes where nothing can replace offline experience, as you said, of interaction between arbitrators and counsel, eye contact, emotional aspects.
I mean, it's quite interesting. I have a case. I've just been appointed in a case, actually, as a chair, where one of the parties, I know their general counsel just because I have seen them on panels, you know, in conferences. And he is someone who's very gung-ho about technology, you know, adopting technology, and it's less expensive for clients, and lawyers are dinosaurs, and they should go for technology. This guy, very, very pro-technology. So obviously, the first thing I do when I contact the parties, I say, no, we have to have a case management conference, and will the parties tell the arbitrators, if you want to have an online hearing? And I was sure he was going to say, well, of course. No one wanted an online hearing. No one did. It's quite interesting, and it's not the first time I see this. Some parties are very reluctant still to, especially when there is a fact-heavy issue, you know, about who said what to whom, and credibility of witnesses is involved, very reluctant. So I think it's not just the lawyers who are a problem.
Yeah.
It's a question of familiarity as well.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sophie. I would like now to pass the floor to my fellow co-moderator, Veronika. Veronika, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Elena. Yeah, and now I will address and I will ask a couple of questions regarding diversity, which really interest all of us. And the first question is, Sophie, you also speak about importance of diversity in international arbitration, and not only gender diversity, but also age diversity, cultural diversity. But according to various studies, when parties while choosing an arbitrator, the decisive factor would be still professional qualifications and experience. And gender and diversity usually is neglected. But why do you think it's still important from practical point of view to promote diversity?
So I was very disappointed to see in the latest, I think it's the latest or the one before anyway, a recent Queen Mary survey with White case, where the respondents were not too fussed about diversity, didn't really see the point of it, which I think, I'm told, and I've read, is completely wrong from a scientific perspective. I think there are studies out there that show that a more diverse decision-making panel, be it in law or medicine or anything else, corporate, is a better one, better informed. So on the other hand, I've been asked by Burford Capital, the third-party funders. They have this fantastic project called the Equity Project, where for the first time, to my knowledge, you have an entity like Burford, who's swimming in money, who have decided to put aside $50 million of funds to be allocated as a matter of priority to cases that are led by women, for example, or who have an all-female lawyers team, really women-led arbitration cases. So 50 million for those cases in priority. And they've asked me to be one of their ambassadors, to make the project known. And as part of that, I did a Q&A with a younger colleague who works in a very big law firm, and she was explaining to me that she is starting to see a great difference on the diversity front from clients, because her firm was pitching for work at a very large oil and gas company, and they arrived at the meeting, and in front of them was a team of in-house counsel, 15 women. Wow. 15 women, and they didn't know what to expect. This was a normal sort of pitch, and nobody said only women. It was not like that. 15 women, and they were asked by this team, what are your numbers in terms of diversity? How many female partners do you have? How much do you pay your senior associates who are female? How many of them have client contact? How many of them are encouraged? Really a barrage of questions. And at the end of the day, that client said to them, if you can't answer these questions, you're not on our panel. That's it. That's where the real change comes from, in my view. And I think if you see those large corporations trying to put forward diversity in this way, it's going to happen that at the end of the day, they will have to have arbitration panels that are reflective of their own values. Otherwise, they will lose trust in the process. So it's not moving quickly enough, in my view, but it's moving, and it's moving in the right direction. So we see that for gender, and it's going to happen in other fields. Now, age diversity is a more difficult one, as I was saying earlier on. There is an experience factor that is a little bit more difficult to fit in. However, it doesn't mean that there is no space on the panel for younger colleagues. I mean, I'm seeing quite a lot of cases where I'm being appointed as chair with two younger, or not necessarily younger, but maybe less experienced in arbitration colleagues, who essentially are there, very good lawyers, very able lawyers, but not as familiar with the process and are there to learn, and it works really well.
Oh, this is great news. This really gives hope. Thank you so much. Yeah, and the next question, would you say that the situation with gender diversity has improved in international arbitration as compared to, for example, 5 or 10 years ago? Is there any trend that is crystallizing? Would you say that the appointments of female arbitrators have increased?
I mean, I'm obviously not. I don't have insight into the international arbitration institutions. All I know is the statistics that they put forward. But I will say that first of all, we're talking about it, and we're talking about it in a big way. That's important. There is the initiative of Burford that I told you about. There is the pledge, as you know, obviously that asks you to put an equal number of men and women in your lists of arbitrators. I know the institutions like ICSID, for example, and the ICC have done a great deal of work to make sure that there is equal representation on the lists anyway. So I have definitely there is it's not the same world as when I arrived in this field at all, which is, as I told you, 13 years ago now. So that's very good news indeed. Now, the thing is though, as always with these things, it's up to us now to show that we are worthy of this. We've been saying, you know, we want this, we want that, we're equal. Well, now that there is an effort made to put us forward, then we have to step up to the plate, and we have to be good, and we have to deliver. That means, of course, that there will be people who are perhaps a little bit, you know, aggressive with you, because if you step up in a place of authority and power, relatively speaking, some people won't like that, just like they don't like it with some men either. But as women, sometimes I feel that some women feel, well, I'm here, but now everybody's got to like me. You know, no one can sort of not like me. That's not the way it works. If you are going to step in the limelight and take that power and that authority that we've been asking for, then we have to have the skin thick enough to take it and to go forward anyway. And so I think there's a little bit of, you know, learning on everybody's part.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's that's right. And I think we will also, during our future events, hopefully the quarantine will end, and we will definitely discuss this as well. Yeah, and another question, which you mentioned already something, but if you could elaborate a little bit. As a practice in arbitration, do you see more female or male counsel representing the clients, the parties before you?
I see male counsel until about halfway down the room, and then female, which means, of course, that it's the males that are first chair, usually. Mm-hmm. Not all the time, but I would say in almost all of my cases, I would say, unfortunately, yeah, 70, 80% of the time. But again, if we come back to what my younger colleague was saying, and to what Burford is doing, that's going to change. I'm sure in the next 10 years, that field was going to be a lot more mixed. I have no doubt about that. Because when you start putting money behind diversity, saying, I'm going to fund your case if you have a woman in the chair, people are going to say, sure, no problem.
Yeah,
money
yeah.
speaks.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, maybe we should start with that, and then when things change. Yeah, and the final question. Let's turn to another, turn into another angle of wide range topic of diversity in international arbitration, young practitioners. For a number of years, you have kindly, generously supported Nappert Prize, which is an essay contest that invites participants to submit unpublished papers on various topics of commercial and investment arbitration. And we were wondering how the idea of this contest came to you, and what is, what is your vision of this initiative? How it started? Because this is really inspiring, and we were just discussing with girls.
No, there were a lot of things. There were a lot of things. I wanted to give younger practitioners a voice, essentially. A little bit for the reason that I was telling you earlier, in that, young practitioners, there are so many of you now, very bright, very motivated, and you're always told, well, you don't have enough experience, well, you're too young, well, you have to wait. And I wanted to give something to the younger generation that could be immediate. A platform to be seen, first of all, a platform to express yourself on a topic of your choice. And the prize is unusual in that, obviously, it's an essay contest, but it has a second part, which was always very important to me, which is that the three best contestants, the three finalists, are invited to McGill University to present their papers verbally. Because in this field, we have conferences all the time where we have to express ourselves on a panel in 8 minutes on a very complex topic, and no one teaches you how to do that. So I decided that the prize should also be an opportunity for younger scholars to be able to stand in front of a group of peers and express their views, but not read their paper. And so that was the idea. And McGill, obviously, is my alma mater. They have, in a few years back, they wanted to put arbitration at the center of their curriculum. So it worked for them. It worked for me. It was a nice way to give back. So that's how it happened.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And it's open for international students, right? Like for...
Yeah, it's open to everyone. McGill obviously hosts it, but open to everyone in the world who is, I think I'm saying this off the top of my head, but who is either a current student or has graduated and is working as a lawyer in the past 3 years. So a young, very young lawyer, no more than 3 years qualified.
Oh, that's great, because we then can spread the information about this contest in Russia as well for Russian young professionals.
Absolutely. I mean, there is a page on the McGill site, so you can have a look.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we can now start with our various question area section. And I give the floor to Tuyana, who wanted to start to ask the first question.
Thanks, Veronika. I will just let me ask you a question of your interest. If you hadn't gone into law, what would you have done?
Oh my God. Oh goodness me. I hesitate between war correspondent and travel writer, something like that. War correspondent, I think I'm being a little bit too ambitious, but definitely something to do with writing, definitely something to do with traveling, which I love and which I'm going to have to find a more sustainable way of doing right now. But yeah, I think that would have been, something like that. But my father was not up for that. He said, travel writer, you're not going to earn a living, and war correspondent, no way. So there you are. Be a lawyer.
But maybe it's just a plan for future.
Hey, you're right. I still have hopefully a few years, and yeah, maybe a plan for the future. Why not? Hopefully not war. Hopefully not war. Let's just stick to travel.
Yeah.
Yeah, most definitely.
Someone posted a question, I think, on the Q&A.
Did they? I don't see any.
Anna Korshunova posted a question saying the following. Maybe she posted to just me. I don't know. And it says this: a question on Kleros. Do you believe that the jurors render decisions in law, or are these decisions merely in equity, but meet a growing demand for such equity dispute resolution in subsectors? It's an excellent question, Anna. Definitely not in law. There is no law involved in Kleros right now, because these are the sort of disputes that they decide are things like, for example, if you want to list a certain token, a cryptocurrency token, that has to meet the requirement of a trading exchange. Does the token meet the requirements? Does it not meet the requirements? That's the sort of questions that they decide. My website was badly designed. Do I pay? Do I not pay? It's binary questions like that. So there is no law involved at the moment. It's more, I would say, common sense. So a type of equity, I guess. But that does not mean that in future there is scope for them to decide according to certain legal principles, I expect at one point. And it may be that the evidence that will be submitted to them could include, I could very well see a letter from, let's say, a Russian lawyer saying, in Russia, the law on website development is this. And so now you can decide, you know. So, but not at the moment. There is no law involved there at all. And the jurors are not lawyers at all. They are people on the street. You know, anybody can be a juror. There is no requirement. Which is another thing that scares people.
Yeah. So next question.
Yeah, I think I have another question. Well, it's a kind of popular questions right now. People asking those questions to each other. Do you think that, or what do you think will change in people's attitudes, people's lives after quarantine ends, or and at all, whether something will change at all?
I don't know because I don't have a crystal ball, but I've been thinking about this. I really worry about the place of humanity in society, just generally, and in our field in the future. I've been thinking I should write something about that, but it's too early. Yeah, we need more distance. I worry about human interaction after having gone through. I know it's only a few weeks, but there is a degree of distrust of other humans at the moment, just being physically present, that I find is very sad and very unhealthy. And I hope that we will not allow ourselves to perpetuate that after the end of the crisis. I don't know how you do that. That's where I think I need more thought. I don't know how you make humanity endure without, you know, putting a whole bunch of people in the same room and saying shake hands, and you know, that's not an answer. So that would be my answer. Travel and the conference circuit and the way that you sell yourself as a practitioner is going to have to change as well. Again, I need to think about in my own life. I mean, one of the great pleasures of my life is traveling. I'm one of those people who actually enjoys being on a plane. But that's not sustainable, and I need to think in another way as to how I get to meet colleagues, how I get to do the stuff that I love doing. So if, you know, we lawyers like to think that we're bright, there's a challenge for us.
Yeah, hopefully we will be able and manage to deal with all the challenges successfully and sustainably. And another question also regarding self-isolation, quarantine, and pandemics. What will be the first thing you will do after self-isolation time finishes? This is also a very popular question. I mean, me and my friends.
That's fair enough. Oh my God. So I've been lucky that normally I would say to you I would take my car and go somewhere really remote, you know, with nature and just chill there. That's probably it. But we've been lucky in the UK in that, you know, for example, I'm able to go to the park during the day for some exercise. It's, you know, it's not, we can't complain really in that sense. So I'm not as you know, oppressed as other people who, you know, cannot go out during the day between the hours of this and that. But definitely, yeah, I go next to a lake. I have a thing about lakes. It's a Canadian thing. I'm going to go next to a lake for a long weekend and just, you know, swim.
Nice.
Sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, that's a great plan. Thank you.
The next thing I think I'm going to do a little bit later when things start being a little bit more normal is definitely have a dinner with friends, you know, in a restaurant the old-fashioned way. That would be nice.
Yeah. Old-fashioned way. Yeah, you're right. That's how we call it now.
That's right.
Yeah, thank you. I think
we have another question from Anna in the Q&A. So, do you have any personal preference as to the video conference software or document sharing platform, and any positive or negative experience that you could share?
I'm not, I mean, it's not been very long that I've been at this, so I'm not exactly, and I'm not on video conferencing platforms like every hour of every day, thankfully. But I have found Zoom is a very intuitive platform to use, very easy, but it's not secure. And for that reason, obviously, Tuyana is why we are here. So I would say beware of Zoom for anything that is work-related and or private. Document sharing platforms, people, in my cases, Dropbox is a popular option, which works well. It's not encrypted, however, but I understand that it's sufficiently safe to be used easily. Otherwise, law firms have very sophisticated document sharing platforms, which I use regularly in my work, and that are really, the one thing that I do enjoy about, there are two silver linings I want to mention about the virus, because there are some positives after all. The first thing is amazing online yoga. If you're into online yoga, you can have an online yoga class by great masters for like no money. So, which in my case, yeah, that's the first thing. The second thing is no paper anymore. It's all, you know, if you get a USB key, you're lucky, and that's fantastic. I'm really, really happy about that. These are two great things to come out of the virus. Maybe the only two, I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely agree on the yoga point, at least.
Yes. I hope they remain there afterwards.
Yeah, definitely.
So, since we don't have any other questions from our audience, I would perhaps ask you the last question that we wanted to discuss with you. And this will be probably a message to our audience and to everyone who will see this recording afterwards. What would be your main advice to young female practitioners who seek to develop professionally in the field of international arbitration these days?
You mean to advance your career?
Yes.
So the first thing, I mean, you're doing a lot of these things already. The first thing is be patient, be persistent. You know, a lot of people who are successful in this field have been at it for a long time. Oh, I've got my.
Oh yeah.
I've been successful. I've been at it for a long time. Don't get discouraged. You know, it's not a trajectory like this. It goes like that. And sometimes when it's like this, it doesn't mean it's bad. It means you can jump higher. But that's generally for any career. In arbitration, doing what you're doing now, networking with your peers, getting to know people, because knowing people is a big part of this field. These are people who will recommend you, appoint you. If they have initiatives, they'll reach out to you and say, would you like to do this with me? This can lead to other things. Very important. Publish. Take a topic that you find interesting and write about it. It doesn't have to be a thesis. It can be a case comment. It can be a book review. You start there. And nowadays, it's a lot easier than it used to be, because it doesn't necessarily have to be a peer-reviewed journal. It can be something online. It can be something on Young Ojimid, that sort of thing. Be visible to others, I would say. And choose, I mean, arbitration is wonderful, you know, obviously, but choose another topic of interest as well. One that maybe doesn't obviously go with arbitration, and try to see if you can't bring the two together, you know. I chaired a working group at the ICC for trust disputes. I mean, trust and arbitration, who would have thought? But that's where the challenges come from, and that's what makes it interesting. So that's what I would say.
Okay, thank you very much for this inspirational guidance and advice that you gave to us. So I will probably now pass the floor to Tuyana.
Yeah, thank you. I see that we don't have any further questions from the audience, so we are quite in time finishing all this. It's been an hour. So I think that would be all for today's session. And thank you very much, Sophie, for such a delightful and such an interesting discussion. And it was really such a great pleasure talking to you today. And thank you for joining us and supporting our initiative as well. And yeah, and we also thank our guests who participated today and joined our webinar. We really hope that we will all see you again at our online or offline events. And please subscribe to our Facebook page where we post all our updates and about our events and other activities. And we would also like to say again that the recording of this video will be posted online, and we of course will share a link to it to all of you. Thank you again, and please stay safe, stay well, and remember that we are all in this together. So, see you.
Спасибо большое.
Спасибо, София.
Спасибо.